Alright, so we have now experienced firsthand both Friday the 13th and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde for the NES. Jekyll and Jason have had their epic showdown, and I think the footage pretty much speaks for itself. But just for the sake of argument, let's do a little bit of analysis of each game and determine who is the baddest of the Halloween challenge of 2011. Who is the baddest killer, okay? So Friday the 13th, I mean, obviously an amazing game, okay? The way that they've really captured the spirit of the Friday the 13th movies in this game is just, it's impeccable, okay? To a T, you feel like you're actually reliving one of the movies. Especially the parts where Jason's mother is a severed floating Medusa head and, you know, does kind of crazy telekinetic attacks to your character. Or when you have your first run-in with Jason and he's wearing a full-body purple jumpsuit and actually runs up and tries to punch you like your little Mac from Punch-Out. I mean, all of those things are completely accurate representations of what they were trying to convey in the Friday the 13th movies, and in some ways actually surpass the movies, even furthering the horror vision. I mean, everything in this game is absolutely terrifying. I think my favorite part was when an unlimited number of zombies came out of the ground around Crystal Lake, because that happened just so many times in the movies that I was waiting, when are they going to have a game that finally reproduces this event accurately, and here it is, okay? I mean, so many cool things about this game. The fact that the game never explains how to actually do anything. The fact that you don't know why you're trying to light these fireplaces all around, or why you only have like 20 kids in the entire camp and none of them have any faces. I mean, all that stuff is just, it adds to the cool atmosphere of the game. And it's so awesome that they actually added the passage of time. Unlike a lot of other NES games at the time, I believe it was this game and also that masterpiece Castlevania 2 were the only two games that really had a background mechanic where as the day got later on, you know, the sky would go from bright to dark. So excellent the way that they implemented it in this game. And yeah, the fact that Jason keeps coming back, you can barely hit him, he barely takes any damage, and he's really represented as he was in the movies. He really is a fucking monstrous tank. And yeah, so Friday the 13th, I have to say, accurate representation of everything that happened in the movies to a T, by far. Now, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, unfortunately for poor Dr. Jekyll, he really hasn't had a mainstream movie hit. There were a couple Dr. Jekyll movies, or Mr. Hyde movies over the years, but unfortunately, nothing is like a giant blockbuster mainstream hit like Friday the 13th. So really, you have to work with the source material. And the source material, the book of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, as you know, was a story about how a middle-aged doctor walked through a town where men in giant purple and pink coats threw bombs in the middle of the street, completely threatening everyone and all the bystanders in the entire town. Also how all the small little children in London carry guns and shoot everyone on the fly, and how everyone in the town was actually faster than Dr. Jekyll. I mean, we all know that Dr. Jekyll had a leg injury, so obviously he couldn't move very fast. So really, yeah, I think this is a pretty good accurate representation of Dr. Jekyll. And now let's talk a little bit about the Hyde character. I mean, come on. The Hyde character, one of the best portrayals I've ever seen in my life of the Hyde character. Whether it was the fact that, you know, he's fighting trick-or-treaters and just punching children's heads straight off their fucking faces, or, you know, he has to find a way to avoid getting completely covered by living human shit that jumps at him, or, I mean, his main attack. Everyone knows that Mr. Hyde's main way of defending himself was shooting fireballs out of his face. I mean, everyone knows this classic story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and really, again, to a T, it really nailed it. And the whole transitional effect of how on the fly all of a sudden you'll turn into Hyde, never really understand why, because the game doesn't explain, it's pretty nonsensical. I mean, do you think Dr. Jekyll knew why the fuck he was turning into Mr. Hyde? It just happened. It was some crazy shit after he drank the formula, and, you know, he couldn't control it, and the game really accurately represents that. And then, of course, finally, the whole mechanic of lightning comes out of the sky and kills you instantly for no explainable reason. I mean, that's definitely how the book ended for Mr. Hyde. He got hit by a bolt of lightning, as everyone knows. And so, obviously, they had to find a way to implement that in the game, and I really enjoyed that. So, these two games, I mean, masterpieces. Again, both of them really, you know, you get so terrified playing them because they really recreate the atmosphere of being at Camp Crystal Lake with a crazy homicidal killer like Jason who can't be stopped, or, you know, being on the mean streets of London and all of a sudden this crazy ass fucking doctor just walking around with a cane that does absolutely nothing, walking about 1 mile an hour, and then finally all of a sudden turns into Mr. Hyde, and he fucking kills all your children trick-or-treating by shooting fireballs. I mean, completely accurate representations of these characters. You feel like you're there. So, it's going to be hard, man. We have to say, who wins the fight? Is it Jekyll or is it Jason? Who is the winner? And after playing both games, I have to say the honest answer is that there is no winner because these games fucking suck, and I can't believe anyone had to pay money to fucking ever buy them. What the fuck were they thinking when they made these shitty fucking games? Like, Friday the 13th, at least I could say, at least in its defense, it's a playable game, okay? It's playable. And once you play it a couple times, you kind of start to understand what the deal is. Now, does the game ever explain that you need to kill Jason 3 times to actually win? No. Does the game ever explain how to use items? Or even make any sense of the fact that you find a healing item and you can't use it on yourself, but only on one of your other fellow camp counselors? No. The fact that items appear out of thin air, that there's a horde of fucking zombies that were never in the movies? I mean, what the hell were they thinking? Now, of course, you might say to yourself, well, Phil, well, you probably wouldn't say, well, Phil, because you're not me. But you say, well, how could they have made a game with just Jason as the enemy? Obviously, that would have been boring. And so I can understand that. And so maybe I can forgive the fact that there is an endless horde of zombies in the game. And like I said, the game, even at its worst, it's playable. You can kind of figure stuff out, what you're supposed to be doing. And I could see that people could get an enjoyable experience out of this game, especially for the fact that it's a really old game. And back in the 1980s, this game might have been pretty scary to actually run into Jason, okay? This game fucking sucks, alright? I don't know why this game was ever made. It doesn't even resemble any kind of a real side-scrolling platformer, and I don't understand what the fuck they were thinking when they made the game. I could see, if you have a game about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, why wouldn't you make the game about Mr. Hyde? You know, the guy who can jump really high, he has superpowers, he's strong, he's a monster, you know, kind of all the worst traits of Dr. Jekyll coming out and making him like a super powerful asshole. Like, that could have been really cool if you were just Mr. Hyde for the whole game, punching enemies and make a side-scroller out of that. Instead, they opt for a game where 90% of the combat is played as Dr. Jekyll, who is basically a crippled human. I mean, my fucking grandmother can move faster than Dr. Jekyll, and she's dead. So, I mean, what the fuck were they thinking when they made this stupid fucking game? I don't understand. What the hell? And of all people, who do you think made the game? Was it LJN? LJN, who is infamous for making bad games for NES? No, it was Bandai. Bandai made good games a lot of the time. What the fuck did they do with this one? I have no idea what even possessed them, first of all, to make a game based off of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and then making it this fucking shitty, having to play as Dr. Jekyll 99% of the time. Awful. So, in the battle of Jekyll versus Jason, there are no winners, because we're all losers for having to play those games back in the day. I know a lot of people did actually play these games back in the day, and back then, keep in mind, there were no internet, there was no review system, there was no way to tell what games were good and what games were bad, so people went to the store, you know, maybe it's Halloween, I want to buy a game for Halloween, you know, spend my hard-earned money that I saved up, and keep in mind, these cartridges were expensive back then, too. You think that games today, oh, they're expensive because they're $60? These games were pretty much, you know, really expensive back then, and to have to plop down that much money and to go home and end up getting one of these, I would be really fucking disappointed. You know, there were times where I went to the store to buy an NES game, and I had a choice between, say, one of the Mega Man games or a shooter, like a side-scrolling shooter. And I would say, oh, let's try the shooter, and the shooter was awful, and I get so upset because I just spent all my money, and I have to wait for several months to save up more money to buy another game. So, if anything, the novelty of Friday the 13th maybe gives it an edge simply because it is Jason, and it is kind of funny to see how they've implemented shit in this, but this game is just completely fucking worthless. I can't believe anyone ever made it. So, alright, I hope you've enjoyed the Halloween special this year between the Saw playthrough that I did yesterday and then also this kind of retro gaming. Keep in mind there is one more segment of Halloween gaming coming up this week. It will be tomorrow. John Rambo and I will play House of the Dead Overkill, which is the HD remake for PS3. We will be doing that. But obviously, if you're not watching this Halloween weekend, you have no idea what I'm talking about, just check my channel. You'll be able to find all this stuff on my channel, okay? So that's it for the Halloween special for 2011. Again, it was completely impromptu, didn't plan on doing it. I said, what can I whip together in just a couple of hours? And I hope you enjoyed it. I had fun. I had a blast doing it. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next year for hopefully I'll have a little bit more free time and plan something out a little bit better, but hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. Stay safe for Halloween.